The Xenoblade franchise has always been notorious for a lot of things. Its convoluted story, overwhelming mechanics, messy UI, over-the-top characters, and never-ending tutorials. So, looking at this game from an outside perspective, it can be especially daunting for anyone wanting to jump into the series. So after 3 iterations, has the series finally hit its stride? Well, there's only one way to find out. I present to you the definitive review of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. From the studio that brought you the big ol' open world of Breath of the Wild, I give you Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Before I go too deep into this, I just want to point out how impressive it is that this game looks and runs the way it does on the Switch. I played this guy both docked and in handheld, and to be honest, had minimal frame skips or pop-ins. Now the game does make a lot of compromises to make this possible. I mean, some of your textures look like they could be in N64 games, the far-off enemies look like flipbooks, and all the far-off POIs are very clearly just static backgrounds. All that said, it doesn't really end up mattering because this game is somehow still gorgeous at every turn. This game looks so good, you already know I'm going to do a montage of everyone running over a bunch of landscapes and vistas. That's a given. But the other thing that this game does a phenomenal job of is scale. There are these huge towering landmarks all off in the distance. These things are so large that even your final destination is visible right from the beginning of the game. They always have the camera pulled way back whenever you're running around because the game just wants to remind you just how small you are in the grand scheme of things. Monolith loves to show that off every opportunity they get. Anytime you climb a tall wall, you're getting a view of the entire area. You just entered a zone? Yeah, here's just a montage of the new area and everything you can expect to see. The world of Ionios is always begging to be explored, and you can feel all the love and care put into each overworld area. They are each accompanied by beautiful sweeping orchestras that do a pretty dang good job of capturing the mood of whatever area you're in. The music overall is pretty damn good. I mean, it's tough to follow up Xenoblade 2, which I would argue is like a top 10 video game OST of all time. But hey, Xenoblade 3 holds its own pretty well. I wish I had like 20 seconds to show off the soundtrack, like using, I don't know, a montage of everyone running over a bunch of landscapes and vistas. Do you see this screen? How can you look at this and know what in the hell is happening? That's what's so good about Xenoblade 3, is that after 80 hours with the game, I can actually comprehend what exactly is happening on this screen, and it actually didn't even take that long. The Xenoblade series has always been memed for its convoluted combat and just endless tutorials. They actually improved that a lot in 3. They do this by just drip feeding you tutorials and mechanics. And all the mechanics are very supplementary to one another. Meaning, when you learn about auto attacks, you then learn about attack canceling, then fusion arts, then fusion art canceling. All at once, that can be really overwhelming, but there's some really good pacing here. Once you've shown your mastery of one mechanic, the next one is immediately on deck. Now, this isn't to say this game is perfect when it comes to combat. It still can be a clusterfuck sometimes. Those mechanics you learn sometimes don't work out quite the way you thought they would. I definitely had to spend a few minutes revisiting tutorials and doing practice battles just to be sure I understood what was going on. This game is definitely the best in this series when it comes to combat accessibility, but that bar isn't terribly high. The best new mechanic in the game is the class system. All your characters can move across multiple classes and without penalties. In fact, the game really encourages you to swap classes. As you're leveling up classes, you're stockpiling different skills and combat arts that let you build some really versatile characters. Let's make a high crit build with some healing that also adds an attack buff and increases damage when you hit from the side. There's an insane amount of creative ways to build out classes, so once you get into the groove of leveling them up, which is a system that once again isn't super clear on how it works, it can be really rewarding. There are the basic JRPG adventure game staples here, running across big landscapes, traversing areas with acquired skills, eating meals to get temporary buffs, picking up just mountains of side quests that incentivize you to explore every single area. And there's definitely fluff in here. Money is essentially meaningless with no strong items to buy. Accessories outside of a few aren't very impactful, and you collect hundreds of items off the ground, but still are always one material short for the most meaningful upgrades. Luckily, these aren't a big deal and don't really take away from your overall gameplay experience. Just a couple nitpicks. From a gameplay perspective, the draw of Xenoblade is 100% the combat. It's so incredibly unique and insanely addicting. Big 15-minute long boss fights felt like the blink of an eye because I was just vibing with these fights. And one of the biggest sources of those vibes, the chain attack. The mechanic that makes every fight feel like the final boss fight, even when you're fighting a level 5 rabbit. You press that plus button, and we're just in. Anime-style cut-ins of all your characters. The music roars, you're throwing out all these different commands, characters throwing out dope one-liners, over-the-top chunky combos from each character, and the chain attack itself is just all about the spectacle. It's the perfect way to cap off one of the most insanely polished and rewarding combat experiences. Time to speak my truth. I played through Xenoblade 3's story, the credits rolled, and I actually understood what happened. This is a monumental achievement for a JRPG. Now, it still does get convoluted at times, don't get me wrong. There are some anime on top of anime moments in this game. But honestly, by Xenoblade standards, the game is, can't believe I'm saying this, grounded? I think the reason why Xenoblade 3 works so well as a story is it just breadcrumbs the hell out of you, leaving little hints as you progress through the story, never revealing too much. Even towards the end of the game, I still had burning questions walking into the final boss. This game really hits its stride in the middle, where you're just getting walloped with story beat after story beat. And just when you think you have a firm grasp on what's going to happen, this game still manages to surprise you. Though some of those surprises fall flat in their face. They have a couple twists here and there that you could honestly have seen coming from a mile away. And they still have that bad habit of falling back onto tried and true JRPG tropes. In fact, there's a moment in this game that is so over the top anime-y that even the protagonists spend the next 10 hours of the game confused about what the fuck just happened. But even with some cliches, I still love the story so much. Even though this game is 80 hours, the story remains engaging. I eventually stopped doing side quests altogether because I was so excited to continue the main story of the game. Speaking of side quests, just do the hero quests. There's those yellow exclamation points. Stick with those. They're all pretty huge bangers and just dwarf your regular side quests in terms of scale and writing. Though a story can't be engaging if you don't care about the characters, and Xenoblade is in no shortage in that department. This was the first time in a while I've been a fan of every single party member in an RPG. Some shine more than others, but they're all really lovable. You really feel like the characters of your party are actually friends and have meaningful, long-lasting relationships. Senna and Lance are just idiots when they're together.
Guys.
Uni and Tyan are the tried and true, but incredibly fun dynamic of opposites attract. Even Noah, who's kind of the plain Jane protagonist, has his moments that put a smile on my face. Even the way they interact when you set up camp are just so fun and heartwarming and feel pretty human. But the fuel that makes this story engine go is this looming shadow of death that hangs over your party throughout the entire game. You see, in the world of Xenoblade 3, people only live for 10 years. So all the characters carry this burden with them that gets expressed in some absolutely beautiful moments in character developments. There's even a villain in this game that wrestles with this dynamic, and the way they express their motivations is incredibly well crafted. So much so that I even caught myself not only sympathizing with them, but kind of siding with them. Play Senna's Hero Quest and you'll know what I'm talking about. Just so many great conflicts around life and death and how people perceive it. Not since Persona 5 in 2017 have I felt this emotionally invested in the game. If you can stomach some JRPG tropes, then Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will tell you one of the most rewarding and engaging video game stories in the last decade. I admittedly was caught incredibly off guard by Xenoblade 3. I never expected this game to resonate with me as hard as it did. This is coming from someone who played about half of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and then about 70 hours of the second. I've never particularly had a deep love for the franchise, but I could not have been happier with this game. Granted, Xenoblade 3 doesn't lean really far away from the common JRPG pitfalls, and I've said this multiple times over this review. So while I recommend it as essential for JRPG fans, I'm not sure I would recommend this to someone who isn't a fan of the genre. This isn't going to be the game that automatically flips you to become a fan of anime tropes and convoluted combat systems. But for me personally, I cannot say enough good things about this game. Aside from the soundtrack, it does everything better than its predecessors. And not even by a thin margin. I feel like it's leagues ahead in some aspects. If you have any interest in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, pick this game up. A game that provides it all. Fun, addicting combat, beautiful art direction, and incredible story. I'm proud to call Monolith's Xenoblade Chronicles 3 one of my favorite games of all time.